Herobrine, written by an anonymous author. I had recently spawned a new world in single-player Minecraft. Everything was normal at first, as I began chopping down trees and crafting a workbench. I noticed something move amongst the dense fog. I have a very slow computer, so I have to play with a tiny render distance. I thought it was a cow, so I pursued it, hoping to grab some hides for armor. It wasn't a cow though. Looking back at me was another character with the default skin, but his eyes were empty. I saw no name pop up, and I double-checked to make sure I wasn't in multiplayer mode. He didn't stay long. He looked at me and quickly ran into the fog. I pursued out of curiosity, but he was gone. I continued in with the game, not sure what to think. As I expanded the world, I saw things that seemed out of place for the random map generator to make by tunnels in the rocks, small perfect pyramids made of sand in the ocean, and groves of trees with all their leaves cut off. I would constantly think I saw the other player in the deep fog, but I never got a better look at him. I tried increasing my render distance to far, whenever I thought I saw him, but it was to no avail. I saved the map and went on the forums to see if anyone else had found the pseudo-player. There were none. I created my own topic telling of the man and asking if anyone had a similar experience. The post was deleted within 5 minutes. I tried again, and the topic was deleted even faster. I received a PM from username herobrine containing one word, stop. When I went to look at Herobrine's profile, the page forward, I received an email from another forum user. He claimed the mods can read the forum user messages, so we were safer using email. The emailer claimed that he had seen the mystery player too, and had a small directory of other users who had seen him as well. Their worlds were littered with obviously man-made features as well, and described their mystery player to have no pupils. About a month passed, until I heard from my informant again. Some of the people who had encountered the mystery man had looked into the name Herobrine and found that name to be frequently used by a Swedish gamer. After some further information gathering, it was revealed to be the brother of Notch, the game's developer. I personally emailed Notch and asked him if he had a brother. It took him a while, but he emailed me back a very short message. I did, but he is no longer with us. M-Notch. I haven't seen the mystery man since our first encounter, and I haven't noticed any changes to the world other than my own. I was able to press print screen when I first saw him. Here's the only evidence of his existence. Squidward Suicide by an unknown author. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for the year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would shit themselves over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and 2 other interns were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, oftentimes lewd titles, such as, How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye by Valve when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny but work-related chuckles. So, when we saw the title card Squidward Suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music plays, as is normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down, as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things began to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point sound is synced up with animation, so, yes, that's not common, but when he stops playing, the sound finishes, as if the skip never happened. There is slight murmuring in the crowd, before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward's in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd, with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, oh. What is odd is everyone had hyper-realistic eyes. Very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than G. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is at this point there is no sound. Literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, in his silence, for about 30 seconds, then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, tentacles, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more, all the while a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. By slow I mean it's only noticeable if you look at shots 10 seconds apart side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists in on itself, for a split second then back to normal. The whine through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound, and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes the sound was coming through from the other side. As good as sound as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched this show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently and something flashed over the screen, as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied, one eye dangling over his upturned face, popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and his entrails laying beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were of course mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing, louder than before, and half body in frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you touched it you'd get blood in your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it were that of a gale blowing through the forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches. The laughing, a deep baritone, lasting at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back, we all were, but he knew he had to. This time the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her breasts in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was to pop out and popped, naked except for underpants. Her entrails were piled on top of her above another crude cut along her back. Again the body was on the street and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. About 5 seconds after the second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound, like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacles down and his eyes were not done in hyperrealism like the others were in the beginning of this episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen, as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all is his sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep-voiced laughing, and this time the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy, about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out from a stomach wound by a large hand, the right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next, same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker and I lost it. I vomited in the floor, the animating and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not, as if they were 5 different photos, they were played out, as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts, we saw the kid's eyes focus on it, we even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop, he had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within about 15 minutes. He was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face, for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out and that deep voice said, "Do it," and we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the wall behind him, and his bed, and he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of this episode showed his body in the bed, in his side, one eye dangling in what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the hell was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it in my mind and cause me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The kh0 was called in to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file did show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened and to this day nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified and no clues were gathered from the data involved nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I have something happening and can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things.
The following story is based on a real event that happened to me a few days ago. No one should have to play what I had did, but I should tell my story to anyone who wants to know about Kingdom Hearts. I'd gone to a local game store that sold new and second-hand PlayStation 2 games, which was good. Seeing as I wanted to stock up on some old classics I sold years ago, I found many games including both the Kingdom Hearts games for the console. I bought both games and got back home. I checked on the 2 discs, considering they were used. Both games were fine, but then I noticed something with Kingdom Hearts 2. Drawn on it was an oval which I guessed represented the number 0 under the title, and also there was no instruction booklet. I just considered that the shop owner marked the disc to show it was pre-owned, as I'd seen this before. I started up the game and everything looked normal and I played the game like normal, until I reached the first time I could save. As I pressed the save game option, I noticed slot 4 had a save file in it. The game had been played for 2 hours yet already was at the world that never was with no money and level 99. This was strange considering I do not have a Kingdom Hearts 2 save game on my memory card. I tried to save over it but the game wouldn't let me, so I just saved in slot 1. At first I was confused, but then I considered that this was just a glitch in the disc. I didn't take any notice to it, since the game still ran smoothly with no hiccups. I continued on with my game, but every time I saw the save or load menu I could always see that strange save file staring back at me, like it wanted me to play it, and my curiosity was growing every time I saw it. Eventually a few days ago I finished Kingdom Hearts 2 and, usually that'll be that, I put the game down for a while before thinking about going back to play it. However, I was still interested in that file. It never appeared on my memory card, it was just there. Finally I gave in. I decided to finally see if it was just a glitch. However, it turned out to be a saved game. At this point I was completely baffled. Isn't the same supposed to be saved on the memory stick it was on? I should have just turned off the PS2 and gone back to the store to check, but I felt that, as I was here, I'd press on anyway. I wish I didn't. I appeared at the start of the world that never was. Everything was normal. I had Goofy and Donald in my party, and of course I pressed on. Battling foes that I encountered seemed pretty normal as I played through, until I reached Roxas. As soon as the cutscene showed Roxas, the game started glitching up. The screen would shake or black out for a millisecond. Then came the fight. Everything was normal, except the music, which played backwards, which again I thought was another glitch. Thinking this as just a minor glitch, I fought Roxas as usual, beating him and getting the cutscene as normal. However, when Roxas was supposed to say, "You make a good other," there was no voiceover and the test said, "We all fall into darkness someday," and then the scene faded to black. I stared at the blank screen waiting for something to happen for a minute or two, until some text appeared telling me to restart the console. I hesitated for a while, unsure about what was going on. I could have just stopped and forgot about playing, but I wanted to continue onwards, so I did what the game told me. When the menu came to the screen, the background was black, Sora was nowhere to be seen, and there was only one option: play. Now this was there. I was thinking to myself that this was a hacked disc. What normal person would do would be to take the game back to the store and ask for a refund or replacement. However, for some reason I wanted to see an ending. I felt I was going to get an answer. If I reached the end, I pressed play and the screen cut to black. When it came back, I was back at the start of the world that never was, the music still playing backwards, and Donald and Goofy weren't in my party. When I checked, I had only one item in my inventory, the Keyblade. I continued onwards, playing through the level. No encounters from anything, no Heartless, no bodies or even Roxas. As I reached the castle, the bridge was already formed leading to the castle. I headed towards the castle, but I arrived somewhere completely different. I entered into a hallway. I could only see the thin pavement, Sora, and a path going on and on with no end in sight, disappearing into the darkness. There was no music, no HP/MP bars, and no commands. Just pitch blackness with only the path and Sora on the screen. I couldn't turn back either, as I'd just end up running on the spot. I had to progress forward. I continued onwards and onwards just to see if this would end. After what felt like an eternity of Sora running forward, I began to notice I was coming towards something. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but the closer it came to the screen, the more I could see it, or should I say them. I reached them. It was Donald and Goofy just floating in the air in what looked like a knocked out state, but there wasn't any stars spinning above them. It was just them floating. Then a text bubble appeared on the bottom of the screen. It read, "Too late." I just left Sora standing there looking at the two Disney characters floating in midair and thought to myself, I guess by what it meant, that I was too late to heal them, before they were knocked out. But then why wasn't there any stars above them? Before I could finish with my thought, Sora then suddenly just flung back in slow motion, like when he does when he loses all of his HP before the screen cut to black. I looked at the black screen, shocked over what had happened. I'd only put the controller down for a few minutes and then I'd be killed, or at least knocked out. The screen stayed black for a few seconds, until I was sent to the continue scene where a heart floats over Sora with the option continue only showing. I knew this game was hacked, but I didn't want to stop. I wanted to know if there was an end to this, so I pressed continue. I was transported to where the player first gets to control Roxas, only this time I was Sora. Standing in front of me was another Sora, only he looked like a Heartless with red, demon-like eyes. There was no music, only a speech bubble that appeared. You cannot escape the fact that one day everyone will die. No matter how much you try to hide, you will too. There is no reward. After you've served your time, we will all fall into darkness. Then we went straight into a battle. The music sounded like a collection of the soundtrack all playing at once, making a demented song. Demon Sora had a lot of HP and his attacks were devastating. Luckily they were easy to dodge and I had the cure spell. While battling him, the image would cut away to a black screen showing bits of the text shown before the battle, taunting me as I played. I was shaken up by what was going on, but still I wanted this to give me an ending. I noticed the more HP I took away from my opponent, parts of his body flew off and bit by bit I was cutting away at him, like my blade was a sword. It was taking forever for me to finish off all of the HP, the screen still glitching out with the text still taunting me. Now I was determined to end this. At last I had drained his entire HP gauge. The screen slowed down and I waited for the cutscene, but then the screen went black for a second and returned to how we were before the battle, only now the heartless Sora was just ahead. Nothing happened, I couldn't move, there was no music and no text. I was also in Sora's point of view and I couldn't change back to third person. For 5 whole minutes nothing happened. I was just staring at the floating heartless head. Then, just as I was about to turn off the game, the heartless head charged to the screen and the last thing I saw was those red eyes until the screen cut to black. I felt my whole body freeze up in terror as I stared at the black screen on my TV. Then a selection appeared. And this is what I wanted all along. I pressed it wanting to know what happened. I wish I didn't. The heartless Sora faded into view, staring at me. I was given control of him but I had nowhere to go. I was just in a completely dark room and I couldn't bring up the menu. The only thing I was able to see was Sora. There was no music, only the sound of crying which I guess was supposed to be Sora. For 10 minutes I wandered around trying to find a way out or anything, but nothing happened. Only the sound of Sora crying. Then Sora faded away and text appeared on the screen. You cannot escape the fact that one day everyone will die. No matter how much you try to hide, you will too. There is no reward. After you've served your time, we will all fall into darkness. Then I was taken back to the menu. Everything was normal again. I went to the load to find all slots were cleared including mine. It was like I'd just bought the game. I just stared at the screen. I'd played the file for 2 hours. I didn't know what to think but I knew I felt saddened by what had happened. It was like the game was not talking to Sora, but to me. It was taunting me only to break me and I felt empty inside. I went to the shop the next day to ask about it. The guy behind the counter said that he didn't remember who brought the game in, he just sold them. I haven't gone off Kingdom Hearts. I bought another copy of Kingdom Hearts 2 this time, not cursed, just to be safe, and I love the franchise, but I'll never forget those 2 hours of hell.